What happens when a legendary actor stands his ground against a host who thinks she can say whatever she wants? It only took 33 seconds for Savannah Guthrie to destroy her own credibility on live television, turning what should have been a simple interview into one of the most shocking moments in morning show history. The Today Show set was buzzing with energy that morning. Morgan Freeman walked onto the stage with his usual quiet confidence, that warm smile that audiences around the world had come to love over decades of incredible performances. He settled into the chair across from Savannah Guthrie, ready for what he thought would be a pleasant conversation about his latest film project. The studio lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, everything seemed normal, but normal was about to go completely out the window. Savannah started with the basics. She asked about the movie, about his character, the kinds of questions that every actor expects. Morgan answered, thoughtfully, painting pictures with his words the way only he could. His voice had that familiar gravitas, that deep richness that could make reading a grocery list sound profound. The audience was engaged. Social media was already lighting up with comments about how good he looked, how excited people were to see his new film. Everything was going exactly as it should. Then Savannah shifted gears. She leaned forward in her chair, that calculated move that hosts do when they think they are about to ask the important question. Her expression changed. The friendly smile became something harder, more aggressive. She looked at Morgan like she had just caught him doing something wrong. "Morgan," she said, her voice taking on an edge that had not been there before, "let's talk about something real. Your generation of actors, you all had it so easy, didn't you? You just walked into roles without any real competition. Not like today, where actors actually have to work for everything they get." The studio went quiet. You could feel the temperature drop. Crew members looked at each other with wide eyes. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Morgan's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. He took a slow breath. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" he asked, his voice calm but with an undercurrent that warned this was not going to go the way Savannah expected. Savannah did not back down. If anything, she doubled down, that smile never quite reaching her eyes. "I mean, come on, you didn't face half the challenges that actors today face. The industry just handed you opportunities. You didn't have to deal with social media scrutiny. You didn't have to build a brand. It was all just given to you because you showed up." Morgan sat very still. His hands were folded in his lap. When he spoke, every word was measured, careful, carrying the weight of someone who had seen and survived things that Savannah could not possibly imagine. "Let me tell you about easy," he said, his voice low. "Let me tell you about walking into audition rooms in the 1960s and 70s and being told they weren't looking for someone like me. Let me tell you about fighting for scraps, for bit parts, for one-line roles that white actors got handed without even trying. Let me tell you about being told I was too old, too black, not black enough, too serious, not serious enough. Let me tell you about spending years, decades, working twice as hard for half the recognition." The silence in the studio was absolute. Savannah's face started to change. She realized she had made a mistake, but she was in too deep now to stop. "Well, I mean, eventually you did get famous, though," she said, trying to recover. "Eventually it all worked out for you. You became a household name, so it couldn't have been that hard." Morgan's jaw tightened. "Eventually. Do you know how old I was when I got my first major film role? 49. 49 years old. I spent half my life fighting for the chance to do what I loved. I drove cabs. I worked odd jobs. I kept showing up to auditions where people looked through me like I wasn't even there. And you sit here in your comfortable chair on your network show and tell me it was easy?" But Savannah was not done. This is where things went from bad to catastrophic. She leaned back, that entitled posture that said she thought she still had control of this conversation. "But let's be honest here, Morgan," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The only reason you got those roles is because Hollywood needed to fill a quota. They needed a black face to make themselves look good. You benefited from affirmative action, not talent. You were a diversity hire." The audience gasped. Actual gasps. People put their hands over their mouths. Crew members froze where they stood. The camera operators kept filming, but their faces showed absolute shock. Someone in the control room probably screamed. This was not a small mistake. This was career-ending. Morgan's face transformed. The warm, friendly expression was gone. In its place was something cold, something that had been forged through years of dealing with exactly this kind of disrespect. He stood up slowly, deliberately. He reached up and removed the microphone clipped to his jacket. The tiny sound of the clip coming undone was somehow loud in the dead silence. "A diversity hire," he repeated, his voice like gravel. "You think I spent my life perfecting my craft, studying, working, bleeding for this career because someone needed to fill a quota? You think my Oscar was affirmative action? You think my body of work, 50 years of it, exists because Hollywood felt sorry for me?" Savannah tried to interrupt. "Morgan, I think you're misunderstanding what I meant to say. I was just trying to have an honest conversation about, no?" The single word cut through her babbling like a knife. "No, you don't get to walk this back. You said what you required." Meant. "You sat there and reduced my entire life. Everything I have built, everyone I have inspired, every barrier I helped break down. You reduced all of that to a checkbox on some executive's diversity form." He placed the microphone on the chair where he had been sitting. The gesture was final, absolute. "I have been disrespected before. I have dealt with racism my entire career. But I will not sit here and let you insult me on live television and pretend it's journalism. I will not let you diminish my accomplishments to make yourself feel important." Savannah's face had gone pale. She was stammering now, trying desperately to find words that would fix what she had broken. "Morgan, please, I did not mean it that way. I was trying to discuss the complexities of the industry. I think we just got off on the wrong foot here. If you would just sit back down, we can." "Wrong foot?" Morgan's voice rose for the first time, not quite a shout but close. "You told me I did not earn my career. You told me my achievements are meaningless. You told me, to my face, that my talent is irrelevant. And you think that is the wrong foot? That is not a misstep, Savannah. That is who you are." He turned to walk away. The audience was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. This was the moment everyone would remember, the moment that would be replayed thousands of times. The moment when a legend said, "Enough is enough." But before he left the stage, Morgan turned back one more time. His eyes swept across the studio, across the cameras, across the audience that would spread this story to millions. "I worked 3 jobs while going to acting school," he said, his voice quieter now, but somehow more powerful. "I lived in apartments with no heat. I ate 1 meal a day because that was all I could afford. I was rejected thousands of times, thousands. Every single day I had to prove I belonged in rooms where people looked at me and saw only my skin color. Every single role I earned, not because someone gave me a handout, not because of quotas, because I was better than everyone else who auditioned, because I worked harder, because I never gave up." He looked directly at Savannah. "You have no idea what it takes to succeed when the entire system is designed to keep you out. You sit in a chair that was handed to you, and you judge people who had to claw their way to where they are. You have learned nothing. You understand nothing. And I will not waste another second trying to educate you." Savannah was openly struggling now. Her hands were shaking. She kept looking off camera, probably hoping someone would cut to commercial, would save her from this disaster she had created. But the cameras kept rolling. America was watching. The world was watching. "Morgan, please. I apologize if I offended you. That was never my intention. I have so much respect for your work. I grew up watching your films. I just wanted to have a real conversation about the entertainment industry and how things have changed over the years. I never meant to suggest that you personally did not work hard. I was speaking more broadly about—" Morgan held up his hand. "Stop. Just stop. You do not get to insult me and then hide behind apologies and explanations. You meant every word you said. You thought you could say it because you have a platform, and I was just a guest who would sit there and take it. You thought wrong." The audience started clapping. It started with one person, then 2, then a wave of applause swept through the studio. They were clapping for Morgan. They were clapping for someone who refused to be disrespected. They were clapping for dignity, for truth, for not backing down. Savannah's face flushed red. She looked at the audience, at the crew, at the cameras, still broadcasting everything. She opened her mouth to say something else, some other attempt to salvage this train wreck, but nothing came out. What could she possibly say? The damage was done. The words could not be taken back. Morgan walked toward the exit. His steps were steady, measured. He did not hurry. He did not look back. His head was high. His shoulders were square. This was a man who knew his worth, who had spent a lifetime proving himself, and who refused to let anyone diminish that. As he reached the edge of the stage, you could hear Savannah's voice, thin and desperate, trying to do damage control. We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. Thank you so much for watching. We have some great segments coming up after these messages. But nobody cared about what was coming up next. The interview was over. More than that, Savannah's credibility was over. In 33 seconds, she had shown America exactly who she was. She had revealed the kind of thinking that lurked beneath the polished exterior, the casual racism that she thought was acceptable because it was dressed up in the language of honest conversation. Morgan disappeared through the exit. The door closed behind him. The studio stayed silent for a long moment. The audience was still processing what they had just witnessed. The crew members were looking at each other, communicating without words that they had just seen something historic, something that would be talked about for years. Then, slowly, the applause started again. Louder this time. The audience was standing. They were cheering. They were cheering for someone who had the courage to walk away, who had the dignity to not accept disrespect just because he was on television, who reminded everyone watching that some things are more important than staying on a show, more important than being polite, more important than making nice for the cameras. Savannah tried to smile through it. She tried to look like she was in control, but everyone could see the panic in her eyes. She knew what had just happened. She knew that within minutes, the clip would be everywhere. Twitter would explode. Instagram would light up. TikTok would be flooded with reactions. The news cycles would pick it up. Entertainment shows would dissect it. Everyone would be talking about the time Savannah Guthrie called Morgan Freeman a diversity hire and he walked off the set. The cameras finally cut to commercial. The moment they were off air, chaos erupted. Producers were yelling. The director was on the phone. Savannah pulled off her own microphone and stormed off the set, her face a mask of anger and embarrassment. Her co-host sat there looking shell-shocked, probably wondering how they were supposed to continue the show after that. Meanwhile, Morgan was already in his car, leaving the building. He did not need to wait around for apologies that would not be sincere. He did not need to accept explanations that would not change what had been said. He had made his point. He had drawn his line. He had shown everyone that respect is not negotiable. Back in the studio, the audience members were buzzing with energy. They were pulling out their phones, texting their friends, posting about what they had just seen. This was the kind of moment people would talk about for the rest of their lives. The time they were in the audience when Morgan Freeman stood up to Savannah Guthrie and walked out. The thing that made it so powerful was not just what Savannah said, it was the way she said it. The casual arrogance, the absolute certainty that she could get away with it, the assumption that she had the right to judge a man who had achieved more in his career than she ever would, the entitlement that oozed from every word. And Morgan's response was perfect. He did not yell, he did not curse, he did not throw a tantrum. He simply stated the truth, calmly and clearly. He explained exactly why what she said was wrong. He gave her multiple chances to back down, to apologize sincerely, to acknowledge her mistake. She refused every single opportunity. She doubled down. She made it worse. And when it became clear that she was not going to change, he left. That is what made it so devastating. Morgan did everything right. He was the adult in the room. He was the one with grace under pressure. He was the one who maintained his dignity while she lost hers. And everyone watching knew it. There was no ambiguity, no question about who was in the right. The commercial break ended and the show tried to continue. Savannah's co-hosts struggled through the next segment, their smiles forced, their energy flat. They did not mention what had happened. They did not address it. They just tried to push forward like nothing had occurred. But you could feel it. The whole show felt wrong, off. Like everyone was pretending not to notice the elephant in the room. Savannah did not come back for the rest of the show. Her chair sat empty. Her co-host made some vague excuse about her needing to take care of something urgent. Nobody believed it. Everyone knew she was hiding. Everyone knew she could not face the loaned cameras after what she had done. The internet moved fast. By the time the show ended, the clip had millions of views. Everyone had an opinion. Most people were on Morgan's side. They praised him for standing up for himself. They celebrated him for not accepting disrespect. They shared their own stories of being underestimated, of having their achievements questioned, of being told they only succeeded because of something other than their talent and hard work. But some people tried to defend Savannah. They said she was just asking tough questions. They said Morgan was too sensitive. They said it was all a misunderstanding. These people were quickly shouted down because there was no misunderstanding. The words were clear. The intention was obvious. You could not spin this into something innocent. Other celebrities started weighing in. Actors who had worked with Morgan shared their experiences. They talked about his professionalism, his kindness, his incredible talent. They confirmed What everyone already knew, that Morgan had earned every single thing he had achieved. Director after director came forward with stories of Morgan's dedication, his preparation, his ability to elevate every scene he was in. The contrast between Savannah's accusations and reality could not have been starker. Here was a man who had been nominated for 5 Academy Awards, who had won an Oscar, who had given performances that would be studied in acting classes for generations, who had worked with the greatest directors in cinema, who had created characters that became part of cultural history. And someone with a fraction of his accomplishments had the audacity to suggest he did not deserve any of it. The most powerful responses came from other black actors and actresses. They shared their own experiences of being told they were diversity hires, of having their success attributed to quotas instead of talent, of fighting twice as hard for half the recognition. They thanked Morgan for not staying silent, for not letting it slide, for standing up not just for himself, but for everyone who had faced the same kind of disrespect. Young actors reached out to Morgan, telling him how much his walkout meant to them, how it showed them that they did not have to accept being diminished, how it proved that success was not about being agreeable or playing nice when faced with bigotry, how it demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. The Today Show tried to move on. The next day, they acted like nothing had happened. Savannah was back in her chair, smiling at the cameras, doing her segments. But it was different now. Everyone could see it. The armor had cracked. The illusion of authority had shattered. She was still on television, still doing her job, but something fundamental had changed. And Morgan continued being Morgan. He did not need to say anything else. The walkout spoke for itself. It became a defining moment not just of his career, but of the broader conversation about respect and recognition, about the invisible labor that goes into success, about the assumptions people make based on skin color, about the courage it takes to demand dignity. Think about what that moment really represented. Think about all the times Morgan had probably heard similar things, all the times people had questioned his success, all the times he had been told he was lucky instead of talented, all the times he had to prove himself again and again while others were given the benefit of the doubt. And think about the strength it took to finally say no, to finally refuse to accept it, to finally draw a line that could not be crossed. Savannah thought she was in control. She thought she could say whatever she wanted because she was the host, because it was her show, because she had the power. But power is not real when it is based on nothing more than position. Real power comes from integrity, from talent, from respect earned over years of consistent excellence. Morgan had that power. Savannah did not. And when they clashed, there was only ever going to be one outcome. The walkout became a teaching moment. Film schools showed it in classes about professionalism and self-respect. Business seminars used it as an example of knowing your worth. Parents showed it to their children to demonstrate that being successful means never letting others define you. It transcended entertainment news and became something bigger, something that resonated with anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed. What made the whole thing even more remarkable was Morgan's restraint. He had every right to be furious. He had every reason to explode, to unleash decades of accumulated frustration and anger. But he did not. He kept his cool. He made his points clearly and powerfully without losing control. He showed that you can be firm without being aggressive, that you can stand up for yourself without stooping to someone else's level. Savannah's attempt at an apology later in the show rang hollow. It was one of those carefully worded non-apologies that public figures give when they know they have to say something but do not actually want to admit they were wrong. She was sorry if anyone was offended. She did not mean for it to come across that way. She was just trying to have a difficult conversation. All the usual phrases that mean absolutely nothing. But the damage was done. You cannot unsay something like that. You cannot call someone's entire career into question and then pretend it was just a misunderstanding. You cannot diminish a lifetime of achievement and expect a quick apology to fix it. The words were out there. They would always be out there, and people would always remember. The incident raised bigger questions too. How many other times had this happened when cameras were not rolling? How many other actors had been told similar things in private meetings, in casting offices, in industry events? How? Many people had nodded and smiled and accepted the disrespect because they felt they had to. Morgan's walkout suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop accepting it. Time to stop pretending that these attitudes did not exist. Time to call them out, loudly and publicly. The studio audience that day went home with a story they would tell forever. They had witnessed history. They had seen the exact moment when a legendary actor refused to be disrespected. They had watched as entitlement crashed against dignity and lost. They had been part of something real, something unscripted, something that mattered. And in his car, driving away from the studio, Morgan probably allowed himself a small smile, not because he enjoyed the confrontation, not because he liked making scenes, but because sometimes, just sometimes, you have to stand up, you have to say no, you have to make it clear that your worth is not up for debate, and when you do it with grace and strength and absolute clarity, the whole world pays attention. The moment when Morgan stood up and removed his microphone would be replayed endlessly. It became iconic. That simple gesture, that quiet refusal to continue, said more than 1,000 words could have. It was powerful in its simplicity. There was no drama, no theatrical exit, just a man saying, "I am done here," and meaning it completely. Savannah had tried to trap him. She had tried to create a moment where she could position herself as the one asking the tough questions, the one willing to challenge even the most beloved figures. But she had miscalculated badly. She had picked the wrong person. She had underestimated the resolve of someone who had spent his entire life overcoming obstacles that she could not imagine. She had thought she could diminish him, and he would just take it. She could not have been more wrong. The aftermath showed the power of the moment. It was not just entertainment news. Major newspapers covered it. Television networks analyzed it. Social scientists wrote about it. It became a case study in power dynamics, in media responsibility, in the lingering effects of systemic racism. It became bigger than just one interview gone wrong. Other hosts started being more careful with their questions. The industry took notice. There was a recognition that this could have happened to any of them, that the old way of doing things maybe needed to change. That respect was not optional. That you could not say whatever you wanted just because you had a microphone and a camera. Morgan's fellow actors in the industry stood with him universally. There were no dissenting voices. No one tried to both sides it. Everyone recognized what had happened. Everyone understood why he walked out. Everyone agreed that Savannah had crossed a line that should never be crossed. The solidarity was remarkable and telling. The audience that morning had come expecting a typical talk show segment. They got a masterclass in dignity instead. They witnessed someone refuse to compromise their principles for television. They saw that fame and success do not mean you have to accept being insulted. They learned that walking away is sometimes the most powerful statement you can make. 33 seconds. That is all it took for Savannah to destroy her credibility. 33 seconds of entitlement, of casual racism dressed up as tough questions, of thinking she was untouchable. And it took even less time than that for Morgan to show the world what real class looks like, what dignity looks like, what it means to know your worth and refuse to let anyone diminish it. The Today Show stage felt different after that day. There was a weight to it, a reminder that words matter, that you cannot say whatever you want without consequences. That power comes with responsibility. Savannah continued hosting, but the incident never fully went away. It became part of her legacy, whether she wanted it to be or not. A permanent reminder of the day she underestimated Morgan Freeman. Years from now, people will still talk about that morning. They will show the clip to younger generations. They will use it as an example of how to handle disrespect with grace, how to stand firm without losing your composure, how to make a statement without saying more than necessary. Morgan Freeman taught a masterclass that day, and the classroom was the entire world watching live television. In the end, this moment proved something essential. It proved that talent cannot be dismissed, that hard work cannot be erased, that dignity cannot be taken away unless you surrender it. Morgan Freeman walked onto that stage as a legend and walked off as something more. He became a symbol of standing up for yourself, of refusing to accept less than you deserve, of knowing that some battles are worth fighting even when walking away seems easier. The silence after he left spoke volumes. The empty chair where he had been sitting became the most powerful image of the day. It represented everything that had been said and everything that did not need to be said anymore.